Today, we're going to talk about job descriptions, whether it's a cloud architect job description, a software engineer job description, a network engineer job description. Job descriptions can be very tricky and in many cases, a little on the unique side. My name is Mike Gibbs and I'm the CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I'm here with Kristina Marino, the President of IT Accel, which is an extremely good recruiting firm in New York Metro. Today, we're going to talk about job description, whether it's a cloud architect job description, a software engineer job description, a network engineer job description. Job descriptions can be very tricky and in many cases, a little on the unique side. So we're here with expert recruiter Kristina. Kristina, I've known her for over 20 years. She's placed me and so many people I know and respect in fantastic jobs. We're going to talk about job descriptions today. Kristina, you want to just talk a little bit about yourself and your organization for about a minute or so?
Sure. I'm Kristina Marino, President of IT Accel. We're a technology staffing and recruitment services. We are a national staffing company placing contractors and FTE people across the U.S. and also in Canada. Offices are outside of Grand Central Station in New York City. That's our headquarters.
All right. Thank you so much for that. So, Kristina, I look at job descriptions, and quite honestly, I've never had more than 10% of the skills on any job description for any job that I've ever gotten.
Yep.
And when I look at job descriptions, it almost feels like they want 3 Olympic gold medals, they want 100 years experience in 5 different careers. And I don't know anyone that would ever meet any job description. So I know when I speak to a recruiter like you about a job, you know what the job actually is because you've spoken to hiring managers and you ask what their desires are. So could you talk a little bit about the job descriptions out there and why they might be the way they're actually written?
Right. So I think we need to touch base on 2 things. Why these job descriptions are so generic, and also how an agency recruiter plays a crucial role on bridging that gap between clients and candidates and giving clarity on what those job descriptions actually are, because it's gotten worse and worse over the years. Mike, do you remember, I'd love to talk about this real quick. How did we find jobs before the internet?
I personally called the Great Tech Recruiter and I said, I'm in the market. And then I usually called you and then you introduced me to the hiring manager.
Right. So it was through recruiters, right, from an agency, or you would look through in New York, we looked at the New York Times. Every Sunday, the New York Times was huge, right? It was on the Sunday Times, it was like the stack was this big. And we would go through all of the jobs in the New York Times and apply. And those job descriptions in the New York Times had to be basic. Number one, because it was so expensive to run an ad. I remember working as a recruiter and begging the owner of the company at my firm to pay for an ad because I had an amazing role with a hiring manager and I knew I had a great opportunity to fill that role. And where would we get candidates? We would put a job in, but it was very, very expensive. You couldn't put a full job description in that ad. So I would beg the owner to pay for it, which was like $500 for and that was a lot of money back then. So the job descriptions it was just, they had to be really precise and you couldn't, you had to cut to the chase. And things have changed. It really has gotten worse and worse as far as generic job descriptions are concerned. But let me take off my recruiter hat and put on my HR hat. Even though my recruiter hat is a lot cooler, but let me put on my recruiter hat and explain why that these that the job descriptions are so generic. So there's number one, there's legal compliance, right? Over the years, the employment laws and regulations has skyrocketed, especially in New York. So there's a generic language used to avoid any potential bias in the job descriptions. Also, template usage. Many companies use standardized templates for job descriptions, and they contain generic language so that it's, to ensure consistency across the various roles within the organizations. Another reason is having a broad appeal and flexibility in hiring. Mike, as you know, how many times have job descriptions, changed within a week? Let's just say, as far as like having that broad appeal or casting a net, if the job is, for example, network engineering, if it's an engineering and operations position where they're doing troubleshooting, implementation, design, also architecture, you really want to appeal to the masses, and you want to keep a broader job description so that, you cast that net and you can recruit and potentially bring in candidates that can fill all these different types of roles. As far as the flexibility in hiring, you want to consider, again, a wider pool of candidates because things do change. They can change within a week. If somebody resigns from a role that's more engineering and less operations, then you want to be able to kind of, cover that as well. So yeah, keeping internal communication standardized and generic in the organization, and also avoiding conflicts. When you have multiple teams that are contributing to a specific function, that can prevent disputes for, specific job duties. So those are the reasons. Those are like main reasons. There's much more, but I think those are main reasons why these generic descriptions are out there from an HR perspective. You have enterprise organizations that are very HR centric. You really need to make sure that you are, you're kind of working in those, in that standardized, rules and regulations for that specific, for that company. So that's what we're saying. Unfortunately, I just had a call last week with somebody that applied for a job. It was a generic job description, but applied, wound up having a chat with a bot, got an offer, and was sent an offer letter, and was sent information about putting their, their financial information to start getting paid, with direct deposit, and then realized that it was fraud. Yeah. So that's also something that people need to look out for when they're applying for jobs and looking at these job descriptions. So yes, generic job descriptions are common. Also, there's fraud, which is unfortunate that a lot of people are kind of running into, especially I think younger people that are not familiar with the certain processes, hiring processes from different organizations. Like they think this is pretty standard now to have a chat interview.
Kristina, I've always gotten the job description via two ways. In most cases, I call you to find out about the job, and you actually spoke to the hiring manager, so you know the job description.
Exactly.
Here's the other way I really get it. Mm-hmm. At the end of the interview, they always ask, do you have any questions? And everybody has their own list of questions, and I just asked this simple question. Mr. or Mrs. Hiring Manager, could you tell me what your goals are and the company's goals are so that if I know I was on your team, I could help make you more successful?
Right.
And to me, that's the job description, what the hiring manager's goals are.
Well, and here's why. So I think understanding why these job descriptions are out there can help people navigate and see and try to figure out and do some digging and do their own research. A lot of times you're dealing with either internal recruiters or you're sending a resume to a job that was posted on LinkedIn, and you can see that there's 1,000 or 1,500 applicants that have submitted their resume. Again, an agency recruiter plays such a crucial role in bridging the gap between the client and candidates. So recruiters bring that clarity to the job description, which basically it's a great way to have an effective recruitment process and find the best candidates and sell those candidates on the role. So recruiters can schedule a call with a hiring manager to understand, just like you said, to understand the intricacies of the role, really get a good idea of, gather information on the company culture, on the team dynamics, on the real specific requirements for the position. really have an in. If they've placed candidates in that company before, they also have that, gathering information from, and the inside information from those people that they've placed. They can really find out more and have an off the record conversation with those candidates that they've placed, to really kind of give you a good idea of what the company culture is. They could also, agencies, recruiters can also define, key requirements. So they could have like just a clear outline to those, to have what qualifications, skills, and experience that are needed, really truly needed for the job. They work closely to identify the non-negotiables and prioritize the most critical aspects of the role. That's another huge in that you can have, that leverage that you can have going in to the, for an interview.
Kristina, you bring up two things that are both very important. One is these all over the place job descriptions really hurt people in two ways.
Right.
The first way is you've got someone and they want to study for their career and they look at a job description that has no relation to their actual job. Then they try to learn everything on a job description. And in the end, they couldn't learn it in 200 years, all the things that are in the job description. So they end up failing the interview. The other thing that terrifies me is I've interviewed a lot of people in my life. I think it's about 6,000 people at this point. And it's as if someone told them, rewrite your resume to match the job description. So they rewrite their resume for the job description, and then you ask them questions about what's on the resume. And when you look at the resume, at least the way I do, I look for the things that don't feel right. They feel out of place, like they were written, or they feel above the person's skill set for the role they're in, and I target and I ask them those questions because I can't hire someone I don't trust. And then as soon as I ask them questions about the things that are on the resume that I don't think they actually know, they prove to me they don't know. And then unfortunately, I'm interviewing someone that I can't trust, and I can't hire someone that I can't trust. So to me, learning the job description, learning the right skills for the job is so essential.
Right. And agents, recruiters they're allowed to ask probing questions about the day-to-day responsibilities, about the team, about reporting lines or just the structure, the hierarchy. They're also able to, research the industry and give kind of, a good understanding of the industry and the market trends that are kind of, related to the position. The collaboration with hiring managers is key. It really is. So to have that strong working relationship with the hiring manager or decision maker and having that open communication, it just gives tremendous insight to any changes in the job specs or the evolving priorities for the positions, or that open line of communication. It can really make or break an interview for somebody. It's such valuable information to have all of this. And it's so unfortunate, but when you're dealing with an internal recruiter at an organization or don't have that representation from a recruiter, you just don't have that leverage. It's like I said, it could be a make or break going on an interview.
It really can.
Yep.
Especially, I actually had an interview 20 years ago, and I had two opportunities at the time, Cisco, which I took, and another was a really good tech company. And I was in HR, and for some reason, the HR recruiter was asking me tech questions. And she had a multiple choice exam where she was looking for answers.
Right.
And she asked me, it was a silly question. She says, what's the multicast address for OSPF? And I said, which one are you looking for? And she says, what do you mean? I said, 224.0.0.5 is all SPF routers, but 224.0.0.6 is all DR other routers. Which one do you want? Because I can't give you a straight answer because you're asking me a question. And I don't know. She says, there's only one. And I said, do you have any distinguishing engineers on your instant messaging app that you're using? And she says, yes. I said, ask them the question and see what the response was.
Right.
And the response was, It's 224.0.0.5 and 224.0.0.6. And the distinguished engineer says, you got to hire Mike. She said, because you've been interviewing people with this technique for the last few years. We've interviewed thousands. If he's the only one that actually noticed this was wrong, we need him on our team.
Right.
I was like thinking, I was bewildered. I'm like, why is this person trying to gauge me? They don't know. They have no idea. Just send me up to the technical team and let's avoid all this internal stuff in the first place.
Right.
And when it came down to it, they made me a really good offer. But I said, you know what? This whole recruiting process just didn't feel a little right to me. What's the organization going to be like? Is it going to be a little confused? Is it going to be goofy? And it wasn't for me. I went to Cisco and it was the best thing that happened. I almost think the job descriptions for most jobs could be summarized in the following. The ability to do the job that they want and do it well. The ability to be smart and learn quickly. The ability to be adaptable and flexible,
right?
The ability to communicate and communicate well, the ability to be trustworthy, energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the job, emotional intelligence, willing to go above and beyond, and a team player. If people had those skills, what percentage of companies do you think would hire the person?
Big percentage. But what you just named is soft skills.
Yes, except for the competency.
Well, right. That's right. But it's soft skills that lands you the position at the end of the day. That's been my experience as well.
It's been mine, and especially for roles like architect, you can't get them without soft skills. Any customer-facing role, but it saddens me, and I do like certifications. I've done some, but I like them to get that interview, and after that, I like competency. But I know people that will literally get 30 and 40 and 50 certifications and never focus on their soft skills or business acumen. In the end, they can't get anything great anyway.
Right. I mean, we had this conversation last week about some of the hiring managers and the CTO that I work closely with at a bank in New York City. That when he would give me a job description from whether it was from a help desk or a C-level person, it was find me somebody who's fungible and smart, who can get shit done.
Yeah.
That's a job description. And I hate that. Fungible and smart and get it done. That's what I want. And again, it could be from anything from a project manager to a business analyst to a VP of network architecture. And it brings such clarity to it. The soft skills are like, what, 90% of the role?
Yeah.
It's 90% of the role. And everybody that I prep for a job interview, I tell them the same thing, that just go in there. Like it's not an interview. It's a conversation. Be yourself. You know what you bring to the table. Talk about your, talk about the soft skills. You have great customer service skills, that you're reliable, you're passionate, you're responsible, you love technology, you love finding out, fixing problems. All the soft skills are what's going to get you the job. Being transparent. Don't BS when you're on the interview. Don't try to BS. If you know something, you know it. If you don't, you don't. It's fine. You're not going to know everything. You're not. And with technology ever changing the way it is, it's learning as you go.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
I actually think you keyed a lot on it, being honest. And, I don't hire anybody I can't trust, but I can give you two examples of my career where I basically said I didn't know, and that's when they hired me. For my first tech job. They had asked me 2 or 3 questions. I answered it well. And then they asked me about a routing protocol, EIGRP, and I knew all of them but that routing protocol.
Right.
And I said to the initial hiring manager, Devendra, I'm sorry I've not had the opportunity to learn the technology yet, but I'm highly energetic, I'm highly enthusiastic, and I love technology. I said, Devendra, I know what I know and I know what I don't know, and I can find the answers to things quickly. And if you want to judge my competency, let's talk about BGP, OSPF, or IP multicast. And he stuck out his hand, he was going to hire me. Right. The second time this occurred is I had worked for a company called Riverstone Networks, and I know you remember placing people at the old Cabletron.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they had...
You're changing us.
Yes, I am. But they were known for the most ridiculously challenging interviews in the entire world. You would do 2 or 3 screener interviews, and then they would fly you to a place, and they would do 8 hours of straight technical interviews, plus a lunch and a dinner. And I remember the guy that wrote the BGP code. He founded Versa Networks. He was, I mean, an incredibly great guy whose name was Kumar Mehta, and he kept asking me BTP questions, and I answered him for about 45 minutes straight. He finally asked me something that I was like, there's no way. And I finally said,
You're
Kumar,
stumped.
I'm sorry. You beat me on this one. And he laughed and he said, I was just trying to find your breaking point. I wanted to see if you were going to lie to me. I wanted to see if you're going to be honest. Interview's over. I'm going to hire you. And I went, okay. Now I actually get it. I mean, that was in my youth. But I have 2 years experience before my first principal architect job, but I was young at the time. And then,
But even in your youth, you still knew to, not even at that point, hours of grilling, you still were honest.
well,
You had the confidence. You know what it was too. You had the confidence to be honest. You were like, all right, you got me. You didn't try to you didn't try to kind of like BS him. And that's what landed you the role, was that, having that, like you said, that blind trust is so important.
the confidence means everything. And I got to tell you, I see a lack of confidence in people.
Yeah, I know.
What I see is there's two kinds of lack of confidence. There's the lack of confidence because you're not ready for the job.
Right.
Don't even apply for it. Get yourself ready and then apply for it. Or use the recruiter and get it. Or the confidence where I'm capable, but I just don't believe I am. That's the people that are there. But
Yep.
I always tried to look at it this way whenever I approached an interview. If I was the hiring manager, what would I want to know? What would I care about? And I addressed the things that I knew the hiring manager would care about, which is why I've actually never been on an interview where I didn't get an offer. Now, I'd like to say there's something special about me, but I believe it's truly that I always look at the client. What does the client need? What does the client want?
Wow.
I try to position myself according to their needs.
Right. So it's not so much that you're special, even though I think you're special. I've, always been your biggest fan over the years, over the decades. So no, you just watched Name That Tune. You watched the game show Name That Tune when you were younger. We all did. So you are naming that tune. You're putting yourself in the shoes of the hiring manager. I heard that Name That Tune is coming back for people that don't know that game show. What was it, from the 70s? Was it the 80s?
Oh, I think it's 70s.
Right. So I think it's actually making a comeback just recently. But anyway, we play Name That Tune. Yeah. And we put ourselves in the shoes, of the person hiring. And I actually have the same conversation with my recruiters. If they send a resume over to me to look at before sending it to the hiring manager, I say, if you were the hiring manager and you have this role, what would you look, when you look at a resume, what would you look for? What would you want? What questions would you ask? So, having that empathy and playing the Name That Tune game is so important. Even when you're speaking to somebody, or having the initial interview, whether it's on a video or face to face, you really you don't want to be over enthusiastic or loud if somebody is more like tacit and a little more reserved and quiet. You don't want to go in to the interview like a bull in a china shop.
Exactly. And understanding the key attributes of that in the real job description, and understanding how to sell it to yourself. For the kind of jobs you deal with, for lead architects, people that you deal with all around the scheme, but these bigger roles that typically pay about $300,000 a year, how much variation do you see in the role between the top and bottom paid person for that role? And how much does the interview and how desirable you are impact your salary?
I mean, yeah, it's a big difference.
I mean, when I look at jobs, specifically like a principal architect job, the pay range can be anywhere from 300 to 500.
Right, exactly.
And to me, the offer I'm going to give when I hire someone is based upon how much I want them, which is going to be determined how good their interview is, how much they're brilliant.
Yep.
So given that, it would make real good sense to have an extremely good tech recruiter like you, and we know exactly how much I respect you because you've gotten so many people hired and you've gotten me hired and you've worked with me in ways that I never expected, just incredible recruitment out of your firm. But, to me, it makes sense to hire that recruiter, let that recruiter do the work in the back end, then know how to tune your resume with your skills that match that job. Let the recruiter pre-sell you to the hiring manager, go on the interview, and then let that recruiter close the deal for you.
Right, exactly.
And that could have a big impact in your salary. And let's face it, company pays the recruiter anyway.
Exactly.
So,
And we're negotiators.
Yeah.
We're trained negotiators. At the end of the day, it's sales. You know, and on the flip side, we're also showcasing and what makes a company an attractive employer. Like we highlight like the unique selling points of the job, of the company. There's career development. There's more opportunity, the work culture. So it's also advantageous for a company to hire a recruiter that can represent their company and their culture and go out and find the best talent. You know who really understood that? I have to say, we were one of the top tier vendors for Bridgewater hedge fund.
Okay.
Ray Dalio's firm. And whenever we would come up for a vendor meeting, Ray would come out and speak to all of us, which I thought was so cool because this is again, one of the largest hedge funds in the world, or at least could be the largest hedge fund. And he would come out and talk to the recruiters and be like, you're the liaison between us and the best talent in the world. We need you. We need you to understand our culture. I think he has like 180 principles that the company that the company lives by, and everybody has to understand those principles. And we needed to understand those principles as recruiters to sell their culture, to sell, their objectives, their goals, where they were going, to sell the big picture of that organization. He really understood that. And we brought the best talent to that company. And that was definitely a difficult company to get hired at. You know, they had a radical transparency type culture, which is pretty interesting because you needed to have a certain type of backbone to work in that type of organization where you were getting called out for everything you said and did, and you couldn't have an ego. It was like a no ego environment. But I loved the fact that he took time out of his day to meet with us agency owners and recruiters because he truly understood that we were that we played that crucial role in bridging the gap, closing the deals, and negotiating salaries for both the companies and the candidates. And we were that glue. And I wish more companies understood that when bringing on vendors or having a select vendors instead of having, whatever it is, 50 vendors that now a lot of the VMO vendor management offices that, a lot of enterprise, big banking and financial companies are hiring to manage all of their jobs, FTE and contracting positions. So,
yeah. And, from a company perspective, if you've got one or two people that are great at what they do, that's better than having 40 or 50 people that are mediocre or not good enough at what they do. So for me, I keep my teams very small. And as long as people are good to me, I just don't change people.
Right.
And from a company perspective, one of the big cable companies had mentioned to me that they got 5,000 applications for a single position. And here's the key. You can't interview 5,000 people.
No.
If each one takes an hour, for example, that's 5,000 hours.
Right.
But from all your people. And if the average fully loaded salary is about $100 an hour in tech, including pay and benefits, you're basically going to spend about $500,000 trying to hire an employee of all the people's time. It's about hiring a tech recruiter and paying a percentage, about 20% on average for to find someone a job, and between 15.
Yes.
But and that's a whole lot cheaper than it is spending all those human hours in capital, and you're going to get someone you like in the first place. Right.
Because it's time versus the dollar.
Yeah. And it's, to me, if your staff is fully loaded and doing the work they're supposed to be and busy, which you want them to be, busy innovating, improving the customer experience, improving everything, you just don't have time for those interviews.
Right, because that's a job in and of itself.
Exactly.
Hiring, it's a huge job. And like you said, when there's 2,000 applicants, it's unfortunate because the first 1,000 people are not going to get looked, their resumes aren't going to get looked at. Right? Do you start from, I guess, depending on who's looking at the resumes, do you start from the bottom or do you start from the top?
Yeah, that's the key.
Right?
Then,
sometimes I see my recruiters doing that. What about all the people that applied to a job days ago?
you need somebody to go through them because you don't never know what you're going to miss.
That's right. Exactly. And that's exactly right.
And that means more FTEs, more staff to go through the resumes to hit a job description that wasn't accurate in the first place.
Exactly.
So it all goes around in circles. So, Kristina, I want to thank you for sharing your experience with job descriptions, because that is really important. And we do, as when we're trying to find a job, need to understand the real job description. And one of the ways I say is find the recruiter. Another way I find is find other people that actually work at the company in the same on a similar team and ask what they actually do in their job. And that's another way to get there. But not training for a job description, but training for the actual career in question, I think is incredibly important.
It is.
So thank you so much again, Kristina, for sharing your expertise. I got to tell everybody there that if you're looking for a great recruiting firm, IT Accel in New York City is fantastic. No, I don't get paid to say this, but they've placed me in 2 of the 5 jobs I've ever taken in my careers, and so many people that I've recommended to them have ended up with extremely good offers. Thank you so much for Kristina, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Mike. Looking forward to it as well.